This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. We're in Belgium for this episode of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and joining me today is Ronald Mengerink of de Dochter van de Korenaar. Welcome to the podcast, Ronald.
Thank you. Welcome in the brewery.
Yeah. We're in an interesting part of Belgium. This is a small enclave, a Belgian enclave within the Netherlands, very close to the Belgian border, but a small area. And in fact, and it's not even like an area. It is a patchwork of pieces of property.
Yeah, there are 30.
Yeah. And the Netherlands border is literally a meter on the side of some of the buildings here. It hugs your actual property.
Yeah, the border of our premises is actually the border of Belgium and Netherlands.
Yeah. As I was driving in this morning, the car notified me each time I entered a new country. And so
that's a pain.
So it's like, you're in Belgium, you're in Netherlands, you're in Belgium, you're in Netherlands, and it did that at least 8 times, I think. But here we are, this brewery, you've spent a lot of time in brewing, you've spent decades and decades in brewing, and this brewery in this place is a special expression of your passion, which is a lot of focus on barrel-aged beers. There you've got a very extensive barrel cellar, and when we say barrel-aged, we should say you work with all sorts of barrels, lots and lots of wine barrels, lots and lots of spirits barrels, and you barrel-age beers across a range of styles, everything from 3% very light and pale barrel-aged beer up into the very top end of that, which is a port-like malt barley wine of sorts that is,
something that could have been beer.
Something that, yeah. And
the strongest beer that I barrel-aged is 13%.
Okay, yeah. And then you make this fortified, beer, and so we're going to talk about this whole range of things you make. What you don't do a lot of is some of the more typical Belgian styles of beer, and so but we're gonna. I think that's interesting, and we're going to talk about how you take that approach. But you also spend a lot of time working with winemakers, making sure that you have great sources of barrels, and thinking about how you design beers for that aging process. We're going to talk about all of that, but before we dive into today's episode, a quick word for the brewers out there staring down a broken chiller. You know the pain, warm fermenters, stressed yeast, and that sinking feeling when the repair quote lands in your inbox. With refrigerant regulations changing and the cost of obsolete refrigerants skyrocketing, sometimes the fix costs more than the unit's worth. G&D Chillers is there to help, whether you're a small brew pub or a large full-scale production brewery. Don't throw good money at bad equipment. Invest in a solution that grows with your brewery and keeps your tanks cold when it counts. Big thanks to G&D Chillers for supporting this podcast since 2019. Reach out to them at gdchillers.com to learn how they can support your next years of growth. And Berkeley Yeast just launched Dry Tropics London, their best-selling liquid yeast strain. Now, with all the ease-of-use benefits of dry yeast, Dry Tropics London delivers the soft, pillowy mouthfeel and juicy character you'd expect from a top-tier London ale strain, but with a serious upgrade, a burst of thiols that unleash vibrant, layered notes of grapefruit and passion fruit. A lot of brewers love the clean passion fruit you get from Tropics, but they don't want every IPA to be a tropical fruit bomb. At the dry yeast price point, you can pitch and ditch without breaking the bank, or you can co-pitch with your house strain to adjust to the intensity of the notes. And with nationwide free shipping, there's never been a better time to try Dry Tropics. Order now at berkeleyyeast.com and experience the ease and impact of Dry Tropics London yeast. Also, this episode is sponsored by PackTech, delivering craft beer multi-packing you can trust. PackTech's handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable, helping breweries close the loop and advance the circular economy. With a minimalist design, durable functionality you can rely on, and custom color matching, PakTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. Trusted by craft brewers nationwide, they offer a smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. To learn more, visit paktech-opi.com. That's paktech-opi.com. Okay, Ronald, why don't you give us your story and the story of the brewery? Chart for us your pathway through brewing and what led you here to start this brewery.
Okay. I started brewing when I was 15, and that happened. Well, before that, I was already making jam and wine from different kinds of fruit in my mother's kitchen. And then I always had to bike to school for 20 kilometers. And a friend of mine noticed
20 kilometers of biking.
Yeah, every day.
Ooh.
Back and forth, 40.
Oh, my goodness.
It's good for your health.
Sure.
And one day, a friend of mine told me, hey, that's hops growing over there. And wild hop flowers. And just before that, I read a poster, notably of Heineken, which explained how beer was made. And I thought, hey, that might be interesting. So I picked some of the hop flowers, and the only malt I knew back then was oatmeal malt. So I sort of made a beer from oatmeal, wild hops, and sugar. But when you're 15, your level of appreciation is different. So I thought, that's not too bad. And then I started experimenting and buying some better ingredients. And by the time I went to college in the north of the Netherlands, I was a home brewer. And at the day that I got into an argument with my professor, I decided to quit university and start a brewery. So at 21, I was building my first brewery.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I believe I was the youngest independent brewer in Europe back then. But unfortunately...
And that was some fairly early times.
That was... I started building in 1983, and the brewery opened in April 1984 and closed almost 1.5 years later because we ran out of money. And I was very enthusiastic, but of course I didn't have any money from my own, so I had to take a bank loan. Back then the interest rates were 12.5%, so that wasn't a very smart move. Internet didn't exist, you had to find out everything for yourself. So yeah, quite different days from now. You couldn't buy brewer's yeast everywhere, so you had to grow your own yeast and keep it healthy. So a lot more difficult than today. So unfortunately, in 1985, I had to close it, and then it took me a very long time before I got over that financially. In the meantime, I moved to Belgium and did something completely else. I was a swimming pool builder. And in 2007, I learned that I was debt-free and I was able to do some things again. And before that, I already started renovating a holiday home in France. And after that was finished, we sold the house because my wife didn't want to move to France. And some of the money I could spend on building a small house brewery, microbrewery. So that was in 2007, literally in our house. So I had like 120, 130 square meters. Did brews of 1,000 liters. And
that's quite a 10 hectoliter home brewery.
Yeah. So the first 2 years, I had my profession of swimming pool building next to the profession in brewing. And after 2 years, I decided to quit the swimming pool building and started to focus on the brewery. And from that on, the brewery grew at least 100% every year. So people started noting, having interest in the beers I made, and I think in 2011 I won for the first time the Citos Consumers Award, and that boosted things off.
And Zithos is a club of sorts.
Yeah, it's a club of beer tasters throughout Belgium, and they used to organize the biggest beer festival in Belgium, the Citos Beer Festival, with in its prime time had about 17,000 visitors in one weekend, and they all got to choose the best beer of the festival, and we were lucky enough to win that 5 times.
5 times?
Yeah, but 5 different beers, and I think also 5 times runner-up. So that got us some interest from abroad, and yeah, so the demand was much higher than I could make. So we started to grow and grow and grow, and now we're here at the 3rd location, and I do brews of 50 hectoliters, which in Belgium is quite large.
Sure. And I've noticed, and would love to talk about it, but you have in your brew house here, this 50 hectoliter brew house, an interesting geometry to the brew house itself that is very wide but very short, and so I'm curious about that. And I'll ask you. We should talk about that later.
Oh, that's very easy to explain.
Yeah,
I make full malt beers, and so the amount of grist in the mash tun is this high that if I want the filtration to work, I need a very wide mash tun.
Yeah.
So I can put 1,800 kilograms of malt in there.
You have very specifically designed this brew house in order to keep the mash bed at the height that you want, given the amount of malt that you need to load into that.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the focus of the beers. You started, again, this iteration of the brewery in 2007. Was barrel-aged beer a big part of it even then? And what has driven your style focus? And I shouldn't say, I know beer style is kind of a dangerous territory to talk about in Belgium, with so many Belgian brewers who dislike the idea of style. But for you, you have taken a slightly different approach to the beers that you make than many other Belgian brewers. Tell me about that focus.
I'm from Holland. I'm Dutch, and I didn't see the point of making another Belgian triple or double, because there are so many good triples already on the market. So what's the point of making another triple? And so I decided to make slightly different beers. So the first one was a Alpi Blonde, but that was mainly because even then in 2007, the main part of Belgian beer drinkers, and certainly in the Netherlands, they were drinking lagers. And the first beer that I make was kind of a transition beer between a specialty beer and a lager. Easy to drink, 5.5%. So, yeah.
Bring them along. And now one of your biggest selling beers is Belle Fleur, a beer that that's an IPA.
Yeah, after a trip to Philadelphia, I I drank the Bell's Two Hearted. You probably know it. And I really liked it. And I started getting interest in American hops more and more. And so I think I was one of the first in Belgium to make an sort of American stylish IPA.
The influence stretches in all of these different directions. Well, let's talk about how you make some of these beers, and I especially want to talk about how you design some of the bigger beers for barrel aging, but also then design some of the smaller beers, for barrel aging, because you also even take that IPA and put that into barrels and have a Fleur Sauvage barrel-aged version of the IPA. So, and it seems like lots and lots of beers here, no matter what the scale they're at, end up in barrels in some form or fashion. They end up not in barrels, but also in barrels, and build more variety there. So I want to talk about how you design beers and how you think about the impact and input and flavor from those barrels and how that works with those beer recipes. But before we do that, give your customers a pleasant surprise with Audacia in your next IPA. Brought to you by Indie Hops, this descendant of Strata brings her own flair of catchy lilac and lavender aroma and flavors of sweet tart berries and tangy lychee. Audacia loves family reunions with Strata and has even more fun when Citra, Simcoe, Amarillo, and others join the party. Let Audacia loose and watch the smiles spread. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And this podcast is sponsored by the Midea 5050 Flex, the industry's first dual compartment, 3-way convertible freezer. The 5050 Flex is designed to flex with your life. It can convert to all fridge, all freezer, or half and half with just the touch of a button. Plus, with reversible doors and adjustable storage compartments, you can stay organized no matter what your food storage needs. The 5050 Flex is also designed to maintain a stable temperature even in non-climate controlled spaces, so it's perfect for your garage, man cave, or wherever you need a little more space. As for me, I'm using all 20 cubic feet as a beer fridge, and I think you should too. Check out midea.com/US for more information on how to take your beer storage to the next level. Also, your brewery deserves a supplier that can keep your customers engaged with new flavors. That's why Old Orchard releases juice concentrates and blends with trending flavor profiles like white sangria and passion orange guava. If you need a custom solution, Old Orchard's R&D team wants to hear from you. Fruit ingredients that get you. Get Old Orchard's free samples at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. Well, let's talk about some barrel aged beer here. As you think about what would you say is your most popular barrel aged beer?
At the moment or throughout the years?
Throughout the years.
Probably the L'Ensemble di Montalcino. So the strongest one, aging on red wine barrels from Italy, Brunello barrels. I think that's the most popular.
L'Ensemble.
L'Ensemble.
So talk to me about designing that beer. As you think you had an idea, and your idea was, how do I want to make a beer? And you had the Brunello barrels in mind when you designed the beer itself.
Yeah.
So you started...
For that beer, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as you were thinking about how to design a beer to brew that was going to sit in barrels, how did the creative process work? Do you start thinking about how much time it was going to need in the barrel, and then start thinking about what the beer would need in the recipe in order to last for that amount of time? How did the creative process work?
Well, at first, I want to state that I think balance in a beer is very important in every beer, and specifically for this beer because, the first batch went into barrels for 1 year, but now I let it age in a little bit larger barrels for 2 years, and of course it needs to survive that time, and so you need a longer boil, just to get rid of most of the proteins. And I want the beer to be a little bit vinous. So I have my common neutral yeast strain, and that will ferment it up to about 11%. And then for the last 2%, I use a wine yeast. So the beer gets also a little bit vinous already. You get a little bit more acidity, and that acidity also prevents the beer from getting spoiled.
All right, so that higher gravity of entry into the barrel of 13% then ABV as it goes into the barrel, that you helps protect. And so what is that would be the ABV going into it, but what would be what kind of gravity or plateau, do you then put the beer into the barrel at?
Well, when the beer is brewed, there's about 27 degrees Plato, and when it goes into the barrel, it still has about 3 to 4% Plato.
Okay,
so it's not all that dry, but for a very strong barley wine, it's pretty dry.
Yeah, that is rather dry. We see in the United States some people putting beer into barrels at much higher gravity than that for longer aging, and so that's interesting. When you say you want a vinous character to it, you are creating that vinous character through a combination of malt and yeast. Are there specific malts that you find add some of that vinous character to the beer?
Yeah, but there are, in this particular beer, I use about, I think, 15 different varieties of malt.
15?
Yeah, and I don't know them all by head, but of course there are also some crystal malts.
Sure.
Some a little bit of roasted malt, so you get this chocolate kind of flavor. But the base, of course, is different kinds of base malt: Pilsner, Pale Ale, Munich, even some wheat malt. Just to get the most balanced.
4 different kinds of base malt and then specialty malts on top of that.
Yeah,
that is a lot, and it's a lot of work to make a brew with that many malts in it in a professional brewery here.
No, why? I use sacks of 25 kilograms, so it's just counting the sacks. I need that many sacks of Pilsner and that many of Pale Ale and that many of Munich, Vienna.
As you build this spectrum of malt, you have to be thinking about all of these points along the way, right? That is just most commercial brewers. Even 7 or 8 malts in a recipe is a lot of different malts, and 15 is just an extraordinary amount of different malts. And some would argue that it would be very hard to pull out the small contribution of that small piece of malt in a beer like that.
Yeah, but you don't have to taste every different malt. It's the mix of malts that gives this distinctive flavor.
Yeah,
and I'm more a kind of brewer like a chef, like a cook, and I do things. How do you say it? Intuitive.
Yeah.
That's my major way of working.
So over the years, you have these flavors from the malt stored in your head, and as you think about how to blend them together, you would just pull them together like a chef.
I'm somehow able to mix the flavors in my head beforehand, and when I make the beer, it comes out about like 90% of what I thought of.
90. Oh yeah.
So that's pretty close, and then after that, of course, you get the process of fine tuning.
Sure. Sure. You mentioned that you use a neutral yeast for this, and then a champagne yeast after that, or a wine yeast.
Yeah.
Is there any part of that fermentation that also adds to some of that vinous character in terms of ester production, or do you keep that more tightly controlled?
For a Belgian brewery, I ferment at fairly low temperatures. I try to keep fermentation temperature below 20 degrees Celsius. Many Belgian brewers let it fly off to 26 or 27 degrees. But I don't. I want my beers to be clean, so you can taste the malts and the hops, and not too estery.
And then when it hits a ABV of around 11 and the yeast stops, you then pitch the wine yeast at that point.
Yeah.
Is there any challenge to that? Does the wine yeast just hop right to business, or do you need to do anything to help it get moving?
It takes some time. This particular beer takes about 8 weeks to fully ferment. So pretty long time in the fermenter.
Sure. And you maintain that same kind of cooler temperature with the wine yeast as well?
Yeah, with the wine yeast, and by that time the temperature has dropped to about 17 degrees, so it's even going a little bit slower. But it's working.
Yeah. So 8 weeks then in fermentation, and then do you put it into a bright tank and then load barrels from there, or is there a more conditioning process?
No. After so the last part in the fermentation tank, or actually a combi tank, I dropped the temperature to about 13, 14 degrees, which is also the temperature of my cellar, 14 degrees. And then the beer, after a week, so you drain the yeast off.
Right. Try to clear it up and get it colder so that you have less. And then
after 1 week, the beer is racked and going to the cellar.
Right into barrels.
Yeah.
Is there anything special to the way that you select barrels? As you're thinking about Brunello di Montalcino,
very often it's just a matter of opportunity. But I've been to Montalcino many times, and so I know a fair deal of the winemakers over there, and I've had barrels from 3 different winemakers. The first that I put the L'Ensemble di Montalcino on was interesting. Was an interesting story because on the Villaggio della Birra, which is a small beer festival near Montalcino, or used to be near Montalcino, we met an elderly couple. The woman was an American, and the guy was Italian. And they liked our beers, but she said, well, we don't know much about craft beer, but we know more about wine. Why don't you come to our estate tomorrow morning or afternoon, and you can help picking the grapes, and then we have a glass of wine and I show you the cantina. And so we did. We tried to find it, but at first we couldn't find it. And then we saw some kind of very big lawn with a guy standing on guard, and we thought, might this be it? So we asked, we are looking for Lee. Ah, madame, yeah, I will call her. And then she took us on a tour on the estate and the cantina, and I noticed many empty barrels. So we talked about the barrels, and she said, well, only in good years we make our own wine, and in less years we send it to the corporation. And then we had a glass of wine in their castle. It really was a castle. And that's only when we got back to the festival and we talked to the organizer of the festival. He was like, "What? Did you went over there? Don't you know who those guys are?" I said, "No." He's the owner of Ferrero Rocher and Nutella and billionaires. And Lee was an actress in one of the promotion films of Ferrero Rocher back in the 80s, I believe, or 90s. And then that's where she met her husband. And that's how we got the first barrels, because, a friend of mine is more clever, and he said, what if you can buy those barrels at a very fair price, and Ronald makes the special beer for it, and you come to the festival the next year, and you can pour the first glasses. That was before we knew who they were. But she said, "Yeah, that's fun. Let's do that." So they came the next year, and everybody was very curious about the beer, and a lot of other winemakers were there too, and everybody was tasting the beer, and they said, "Yeah, very, very nice." And then after a few glasses, one winemaker said, "Yeah, but this is Montalcino d'Orca. It's not really Brunello." I said, "Okay, but what do you mean with it?" And he said, "Well, the real grapes for Brunello wine grow higher up the hill. And I have some vineyards higher up the hill. So next year you have to buy my wine barrels." Then another guy said, No. You have to buy mine barrels because my wines score higher in the Parker Guide." So I ended up choosing or deciding which winemaker I would use. And then the next year we had barrels from Casanova di Neri, which is one of the very top Brunello wines. And but they don't often have enough barrels. So I got into contact with Banfi, which is the biggest one over there. And so far I had a lot of barrels from Banfi. And now we're also working with Goldarcia, which is the second largest one. So I have enough supply of barrels.
Sure. Well, let's talk about your barrel process here in a second. But before we do that, Brightly Software, a Siemens company, partners with organizations at every stage of their asset lifecycle journey. Brightly is a complete asset management and operations software that enhances organizational sustainability, compliance, and efficiency through data-driven decision-making. Streamline maintenance, simplify capital planning, and optimize resources with solutions uniquely designed to support long-term goals. Learn more at brightlysoftware.com. And in Flanders, beer is more than a drink. It's a cultural thread woven through history, cuisine, and community. Today, microbreweries honor tradition while experimenting with bold flavors, and young chefs embrace zero-waste cooking, local ingredients, and inventive beer-infused dishes. Even chocolatiers are reimagining Belgian pralines with surprising pairings. Across kitchens and breweries, expertise and creativity drive a passion for flavor rooted in Belgium's DNA. Raising a glass of Belgian beer means savoring centuries of craftsmanship, innovation, and culinary artistry. Come to Flanders in 2026 to celebrate the 10th anniversary of UNESCO recognition and sample this unique combination of creative brewing tradition and culinary exploration. So you rack into these Brunello barrels, and then you load them down into the cellar, which is below grade at a temperature, and you have very consciously designed this brewery and cellar in order to maintain temperature, because you believe in temperature consistency, right?
Yeah. I believe, especially when you age beer for longer periods in barrels, that the barrels should be stored in an optimal way and location. So that means for me at fairly low temperatures, so you don't get any chance of microbes developing in the beer, and you don't want the staves on top to dry out. So the humidity should be fairly high as well, but not too high that you get molds.
Right, right. So what does that mean? And this is a purpose-built cellar that you have dug out in order to put barrels down there. What kind of temperature does it generally maintain, and how do you keep the humidity at a consistent level?
Well, the temperature isn't controlled anything.
Right.
It's just a deep cellar, and it stays at 14, maximum 15 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
The humidity normally is when I do nothing, it's a little bit too high. So I installed just a small ventilator to get some of the air out, and so you get some air circulation to keep it as dry as I need it to be.
And so it just pulls air from up here down there for a little bit just to grab some of that humidity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so that aging process, then now you leave it longer in larger barrels. Talk about the balancing the shorter time in smaller barrels versus more time in longer barrels, and how you know a beer is ready, from that taste. Obviously, larger barrel means less surface area with wood and a lower extraction of that wood character. But then also how the winemaker has made wine and how much that wine has extracted will also impact that. So talk about how you balance those.
Yeah, normally I get barrels that have been used for 5 times making of Brunello. So the barrels are at least 10 years old.
Wow. So that has already pulled lots of wood character out of those barrels.
Yeah, but there are still some left.
Huh.
But the main part, of course, is to get this wine flavor in your beer, and then the oak is added as well because there's still some oak flavor in there. Pretty much, if I put a light beer in there, you get really a lot of oak.
Even in a barrel that's been used for 10 years already with wine.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's French oak.
French oak.
And the top quality French oak.
Well, tell me about the difference between that and, say, American oak.
American oak, of course, is a lot softer. It has wider pores, and the staves are cut differently. And that means you get more oxidation, more evaporation, air entrance in the barrel through American oak. So I never leave a beer staying in an American oak barrel for much longer than 1 year. Otherwise, I get too much risk of having slightly oxidized beer. And the French oak is much finer, has a much finer grain, is harder, and ages slower. So you have less micro-oxidation, which is called maturing.
Yeah. And so you also now use larger puncheons rather than smaller barrels. And, you mentioned that, am I right? And that larger volume, is that for creative flavor purposes, or is that for functional, easier to fill and, one at a time kind of process?
The flavor is a little bit better because, well, you also keep it in the barrel for a little bit longer period. And Sort of the same as aging a beer in a small bottle or a large bottle. The Magnum bottles generally give the best aged beer. So a little bit larger barrel gives just more balanced flavor.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. No, I don't know.
It's a mystery. Interesting.
There certainly some kind of explanation, but yeah, you have of course less wood contact, so less oxidation. But when you compare it to a bottle, I don't know why a larger bottle gives a better flavor to an aged beer than a small bottle.
That's interesting. And I mean, I guess, yes, the same small surface area of potential oxygen contact in a Magnum versus the overall volume of liquid, it would be maybe a similar effect. Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll have to test that for science. Yeah. Well, and then is there any other portion of the process when you're done barrel aging? You taste and you blend, and building a blend is important to you too.
Well, of course, I taste every barrel when it gets out, and unfortunately, one out of an average of 30, 35 barrels has an off flavor, and you have to throw it away. And then the barrels are blend. Normally, when I do a barrel aged beer, I bottle around 2,000 liters, if I have enough of that beer, and then it's just primed with sugar and fresh yeast, and that's tricky with this beer because it's already 13% ABV.
Right.
You need a very healthy and strong yeast to get the re-fermentation going, and that's not always going perfectly. So sometimes it takes up to even months.
Wow.
to have the right carbonation level. So I'm thinking of buying a pressure filler just to get a little bit of pressure already in the beer, together with the yeast and the priming sugar, to make sure that it's just a little bit easier.
Get you to, one volume or 1.5, and then just finish off the rest with the yeast. Yeah. No, it makes sense. So how much carbonation do you typically want in this beer? How lively and effervescent, is this for a strong beer? Obviously, the wine itself is still.
Well, a barley wine doesn't really need that much carbonation, but you want this little head to develop on the beer. So you need about 1.5 grams of carbon dioxide in the beer.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's change gears, and I would love to talk about this beer that you refer to as almost a malt port. You don't claim port, but
no,
because you can't claim that. But it is a port style beer of sorts, where you brew a high gravity beer and you age, but then you arrest the fermentation. Talk to us about this, the idea behind this, and then some of the process in fermentation that you use to achieve it.
Well, many years ago, I was in Porto and I had a tour at Graham's, and the guy was explaining to me how they made a port wine by adding wine alcohol to a very young, still fermenting wine with lots of sugars, and then after resting and getting rid of most of the yeast, the young sweet wine was racked into barrels for many years to become port wine. And the only thing I could think of was like, why is nobody doing the same thing with beer? You can do the same thing with beer. Why not? So back home, I I started asking at my customs officer, can I do this? Can I add alcohol to a young fermenting beer and then rack it for many years and pay the taxes afterwards? And that seemed quite difficult, but eventually, after a year, I got the permit, and so I started making a batch, and then after 3 years, I bottled the first version, but the year after, after 4 years, I noticed there was a very big difference between 3 and 4 years. So this drink needs at least 4 years to become port-like. Otherwise, it's just too alcoholic, and you don't get this typical port-like dripping of the drops of when you see the glass and you shake it, you see it slowly.
It's like the viscosity.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Sure.
So now we have barrels in our cellar.
So did you brew this and then kept brewing it the next year and the next year and the next year, and then
every year I try to make at least 3,000 liters, and so far I bottled every year 1,000 liters.
Well, that is a big leap of faith to have after 1 year to say, this isn't where I want it to be, but I'm going to brew another. I'm going to brew another 3,000 liters of this, and put it into barrels, and then maybe next year, like you have taken a big risk each of those years to get there. But then after the fourth year,
no, the risk isn't really big because the ingredients are not too expensive until you pay tax, and you just start paying tax when you sell it. So it's just taking up time and space.
Sure. So then after year 4, you find it now starts to take on that kind of thicker, more viscous character that you wanted from it. But then you've kept going. Yeah,
and I even made a version only made out of pale malts. That's the one that you already tasted. The Tout va bien.
Yeah.
The other one is sold out for the moment, but it's called Rien ne va plus. So we have two opposites together. And
a Dutch brewer in a Belgian enclave with French beer names with English-inspired barley wine recipes aged in Italian wine barrels.
Yeah, brewing is international nowadays.
This is a very international approach to brewing. Well, in that sense, how does the recipe for the beer in that differ from something like Ensemble, where are there different flavors that you are looking for in that kind of base beer?
Yeah, you don't want too many roasted flavors or chocolate flavors. That's just not. I was aiming to make a malt port, so you don't want to use too many hops. That gives bitterness and sweetness. It's difficult, and you need I wanted a certain color, so you need a certain crystal malts, but without getting these burnt flavors. It's more like Cara Ruby and Cara Terra and the softer caramel malts. That gives a little bit of color. Well, because you use a lot of malts, even with the Tout va bien, where I only use pale malts, you get a certain dark color because you use so much malt for only 3,000 liters that already gives quite some color.
Right.
So you don't need too many crystal malts, and certainly not roasted malt.
Do you, in terms of color, do you boil longer on this to develop more color, or is it a a normal length boil.
Yeah, normal for me it's 1.5 hours.
Yeah, that's not too crazy.
No.
Compared to some American stout brewers these days that'll brew for 30 hours to get a very, very thick and viscous beer to put into barrels. Sure.
Oh, 30 hours.
30 hours.
I thought the Lambic brewers were boiling for the longest period, but that's really expensive, boiling for 30 hours.
With the energy prices here in Europe, I can imagine going at it a different direction makes sense. So with the Tout va bien or
Tout va bien, yeah.
This is the pale version of this.
Yeah.
And that is all just lighter base malts.
Yeah.
Pilsner and two-row or pale ale malt.
Yeah. Pale ale, Munich, Vienna. Yeah.
And just lots and lots of it.
Yeah, you get about 32 degrees Plato at the start.
Yeah.
And then, you also need a strong yeast, but it doesn't have to ferment it completely because when the wort flavor is gone,
because you're going to stop the fermentation anyway.
When the wort flavor is gone, so you have to taste it. Right at that point, I add the grain alcohol because I want to keep it with grains. So actually a very young whiskey to a level of 20% alcohol. So you calculate it more or less. Well, you add this much alcohol and then you wait for a few days for the yeast to settle and then you can rack it. And then it's just time.
You say the wort flavor is gone.
Yeah.
How many days of fermentation does it take for fermentation to convert that and get the wort flavor out of it?
Not so long, 1.5 to 2. Sometimes it's a little bit quicker, sometimes just a little bit slower.
And then that ends up being even sweeter than the l'ensemble?
Yeah, a lot sweeter.
What kind of gravity or Plato or bricks does that go into barrel then at? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't think I ever measured. So I guess that must be around 26 bricks.
Okay.
So quite sweet.
Yeah. Much. That's definitely in the zone with where a number of American barley wine makers are pushing some of that sweeter approach to that kind of beer. Maybe not quite at 19 or 20%. So then over that aging process, it actually loses a little bit of that alcohol.
Yeah. When I put it in bottles, it has about 19% alcohol. And after 10 years, I noticed that I have a loss of almost 20%. So even in my cool cellar.
Cool and somewhat humid, but not too humid cellar.
Yeah. So you still have some evaporation.
Yeah. So that's a good amount of Angel's share. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Let's look at the other side of it and talk about barrel aging 3% beer. The very opposite of that.
That was a challenge because the stronger a beer, and certainly at 20%, you don't have to be afraid that it gets infected or anything. But I like taking up a challenge, and I already had a beer of 3%, gluten-free also. And
gluten-free?
Yeah. And I...
what do you make a gluten-free 3% beer with?
You add some enzyme at the start of the fermentation.
Oh, okay. So it's an all malt barley beer using a Clarex or
and that breaks down the gluten.
Right. We in the United States can't call that gluten-free. We could only call that gluten-reduced.
In Belgium it has to be below a certain level.
Right, 20 parts per million.
Yeah.
you can only still in the U.S. They're very more strict. We're less
Okay.
strict about some things, more strict about other things. This is one.
Like alcohol free, you can call a beer alcohol free in Belgium when it's below 0.5%.
Right. That we can do too, but gluten free, it can't be made with any gluten containing product.
Oh.
And so if it starts with something that has gluten in it, it can't be gluten free. And so we could. But anyway, you'd make a gluten. What we would call gluten reduced, you call gluten free, 3% beer.
Yeah.
Using Clarity Firm or Clarax or the enzyme that breaks down those.
Clarax in it, indeed.
Yeah. So you start with a 3% beer, and and then how do you get that to work in a barrel aging process?
Well, you have to be working meticulously clean, but you also have to think about what type of barrel are you gonna use, because when I would use a fresh bourbon barrel or whiskey barrel or cognac barrel, then the impact of the bourbon or cognac will be so high that you wouldn't taste the beer anymore. And normally I only use my barrels once, and so after one time of aging, I get rid of them. But in this particular case, I can use my wine barrels, and most often that's a mix of white and red barrels, red wine barrels. And after washing and sanitizing them, I can use it for this Passepartout oak aged, and I leave it on the barrel for about 1.5 years, which is very long for 3% beer. But then it still extracts some of the wine flavors, not too much, but some oakiness, and the maturation, the time, and the micro-oxidation, of course, gives the beer a fuller flavor. So you get a much fuller flavored beer with some winey notes and quite some oak flavors to it.
How often, in that same kind of, similar to what you talked about earlier, there's you have to taste this, because if it gets too much of that tannic oak character in a beer this light, it can be sharp and and kind of almost stinging on the tongue. How often do you taste and check? And and I assume these are also going to be French oak barrels to slow that kind of process down versus these American bourbon barrels that again might impart that wood flavor faster.
Yeah. In between, I never taste.
Yeah.
So it's more that I go by my experience and think, well, this beer will take about this long to age on the barrel. I also work with new oak barrels, so I have some experience with the import of oak flavors, and those are my pure oak series. And sometimes I just know that the amount of tannins are a little bit too high to drink straight away. So these beers stay at the brewery for another half year in the bottle before they are sold. And then, strangely enough, in beer, the tannins break down more rapidly than in wine. So if you have a Bordeaux wine, which is often quite, when it's young, quite rich in tannins, you need to wait some years before you can drink it. With these types of beer, it's just half a year. I can let you taste some. Oh no, I think you tasted already Sunday the stout aged on new oak.
Yeah. Well, that's clever then, that you're in the same way that time in a bottle in a red wine will break down some of those tannins will break down and you work through that same process in beer.
We don't have a laboratory of ourselves, so sometimes we send our beers to an external laboratory. And the first time I sent those Pure Oak Series beers in, I got a message back, sorry, I think something went wrong because the level of oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the beer was 0, completely 0. And he said that's not possible. So probably we might have done something wrong. But then I realized, wait, there are so many tannins in this beer, and these bind the oxygen, so you can't notice any oxygen dissolved in the beer because it's bound. So I talked to him about it and said, yeah, you might be right. And the lifespan of those kinds of beers is much, much longer than you expect. I've got bottles here, I think they are 10 years old for a beer of 7% ABV that have aged for 1.5 years in new oak barrels, and they are still fresh and good.
Interesting.
It's really different.
The preservative property of the barrel aging itself.
Of tannins.
Of tannins.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, let's look at the big picture as we finish here. You've been brewing for a very long time. You started your very first brewery at a young age of 21 in the 1980s. And then this brewery has been going on for 18 years now. And, we'll celebrate.
We started in the same year as Brewdog, but we kept... But we kept things a little bit smaller.
A little bit, and avoided, say, major controversy with some terrible behavior. But that's a whole nother question. What do you hope? What do you hope the next few years have for you as a brewery? This is still, I should say, a very small operation. You brew all the beer. You are loading beer into the barrel, racking it into barrels and putting it down in the cellar yourself. Your son does a little bit of stuff around here, and but it's very much a family business. Your wife is involved in the business, and and so if it is the brewery is you all, and you as a family. What do you hope happens in the next few years, and what do you think the future looks like?
That's a tough one. I'm 63 now, almost reaching 64. I'd like to go on for another 5 years or so, but eventually I will be forced or willing to stop. I hope in between. I'm always looking. That's probably the reason why I have so many different varieties. I'm always looking to brew the perfect beer, and I guess many brewers do that. But so I'm still hoping to make the perfect beer and grow a little bit for the brewery. That when we have to sell it. I will get some pension.
Sure.
Out of it.
It would be nice to be able to retire one day.
Because my kids, I don't think they want to take over. They have seen their dad and mom working for 60 hours per week, and they don't want that. You have to be very passionate about beer to go and work 60 hours a week.
Sure.
But for me, it's not always work. It's still part of a hobby.
And it's the quest to make the perfect beer.
Yeah, it still is.
Well, I think that is a good place to bring it to a close. From layout to production flow, G&D Chillers brings real-world expertise and builds reliable systems that last, Berkeley Yeast's Dry Tropics London offers their best-selling liquid yeast strain with the ease of use of dry yeast. PacTex handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable. Give your customers a pleasant surprise with Audacia from Indie Hops in your next IPA. The Midea 50/50 Flex has the power to be all freezer, all fridge, or a little bit of both. Trust Old Orchard for the highest quality trending flavor blends at competitive prices. Brightly software enhances your data-driven decision-making. And come to Flanders in 2026 to celebrate the 10th anniversary of UNESCO recognition. And if you do, you can come out here to De Dochter van de Korenaar, come visit Ronald and the brewery and taste and experience the beers right here in their small cafe attached to the brewery.
Yeah, open on Friday and Saturday.
Only on Friday and Saturday. About an hour from Antwerp, not a bad drive up here, and a beautiful part of the country, and a little trip through Netherlands, back to Belgium, then Netherlands, then Belgium, Netherlands, Belgium. A little bit of that.
Turn off your navigation voice because it's horrible.
Well, if you've enjoyed this episode, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on the subscribe button, and help us bring more conversations to you all over the world with inspiring brewers. Ronald, if people want to learn more about your brewery, where can they find you in real life and in the digital space?
We have a very nice website, also in English and French and German. So you can visit the Dochter van de Korenaar.be. Live I'm here, and sometimes at festivals in Belgium or abroad.
Yeah. Beer not currently available in the United States, but
maybe a few bottles are still left. It's over a year that we sold a few pallets to Pontier Imports. I know in Philadelphia Monks still has our beers, but I don't know how they get it.
Maybe some deep cuts out there, and the Belgian specialty spots like Monks in Philly. And if anyone is at the Craft Brewers Conference in April, maybe we can go find those deep in the cellar that Tom and Bernadette and folks have stashed away. So we will check that out. Anyway, it's been great talking with you about brewing barrel-aged beer here. Cheers.
Okay, cheers. Thank you.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media @craftbeerbrew.